Hey everybody, I'm Josh with Mother Earth News.
And I'm Charlotte with Mother Earth News.
And Community Chickens.
And Community Chickens, sorry about that.
So,
and I'm here to ask Josh some questions today. The Community Chickens people will get that reference to a typo earlier this week.
Okay, all right. And today what we're going to be talking about is fermenting your chicken feed and sprouting your chicken feed. Today we're really happy to work with Scratch and Peck. And they told us all about sprouting and fermenting our chicken feeds. We've been trying it this whole time with the chickens that we hatched here in the office, and our chickens say thank you. And a lot of people want to know, why would you ferment your chicken feed? What's the reason behind it? There's a few reasons, and we're going to go over all of those over the course of this. But the first thing that I want to emphasize is just how incredibly easy it is to ferment your chicken feed. So, Tanya, if you want to come in here, we've got kind of a batch here that's been fermenting. If you turn on the smell-o-vision, it's pretty sourdough smelly. The consistency of this is kind of like oatmeal. And I don't know if you want to get in here, Charlotte, or you just kind of leave me to it.
Well, I noticed that there's nothing to dry our hands on, so I'm going to leave you to it.
That's what my shirt's for.
Oh.
Okay, so anyhow, it's so incredibly easy to start fermenting your chicken feed like this, and I have a setup where I do it about 3 days ahead in the spring and fall. In the winter, I'll have like a pretty solid 3-day or maybe even a 4-day ferment. And then in the summer, I do a 1-day ferment because it's about 100 degrees out there.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and show you how easy it is to set up a ferment like this. I mean, this is incredibly easy.
Sure.
You just, so say this has been going on for 2 days. And I have one more of these that I just threw out to the chickens this morning. Okay, and you're talking about a 1/4 pound of dry food per bird per day.
Okay.
So here's my new batch. Let's say this is obviously a little smaller, and this is about, so let's say for one bird, this is about 1/4 pound right here. You just take it, pretty simple. You cover it with water. I give it a shake, make sure it gets good and hydrated, cover it with just a little bit more, and then, well, let me do just a little bit more. I do about 2 parts water, 1 part feed. And that's pretty much how simple it is, and it sits there for 2 days, 3 days, and eventually becomes like this, fermented. So some of the reasons we do this, the biggest reason for me is protein availability. And that is something that actually doesn't have as much to do with the presence of lactobacteria as it does just the wet mash itself. So I don't know if we want to get too into this, but on Community Chicken's website, there's a great article.
Yep, Heather Nicholson wrote a great article on fermented feeds, and she mentioned that it has lactobacillus, which is something that we've all heard on commercials and we consume in our yogurt. It's very like kombucha, so if you can think of what good things that good bacteria do for you, then that's what it's doing for your chickens.
Yeah.
It also increases their intestinal villi, which Josh helped me pronounce earlier.
Yeah.
So,
and
got it.
You nailed the villi.
Yeah, but it increases the surface area in their stomach, so they're able to absorb more nutrients, and that's going to make just a healthier bird overall because they are getting more good nutrients.
Right, and that increased length of intestinal villi is because of the wet mash itself. And that just has to do with, that's that kind of hair-like lining of the intestines, and chickens, of course, have a pretty long intestinal tract, and that wet mash encourages that villi growth. And that's what we want, because we want to use, whether you're someone who's interested in using premium quality feeds and you want to get the most protein out of it, if you're a commercial farmer and you want to use as little feed as possible while still maintaining your chicken's health, fermenting your feeds is the way to maximize nutritional availability and your feed cost effectiveness. I think another thing that's interesting, now I've got chicken, now I've got I should have gotten something to wipe this on.
Your shirt.
Yeah, my shirt. One of the interesting things about this that I think is really cool is there's actually been studies that have shown pretty clearly that fermenting your feed decreases the sugar concentration in your feed by 77%. So your chickens aren't eating as much sugar. Meanwhile, it increases the protein, the crude protein availability by 3%. And that's some pretty hard numbers on that. And then one of the interesting things too is that this drastically changes your feed to egg weight ratio. So you get a lot more harder shells, more egg material per pound of feed. Now, this is layer mix that we've recently moved our chickens onto. And the two supplements that, I just want to mention that you add, now I'm just getting fermented feed everywhere, that you want to keep going on there. You want to add some layer grit because you want to support gizzard development. And let's kind of just show you. Oh, nice. Thank you. We got some things there. Let's show you the size of this grit. I don't know. Are there any questions about this?
They're asking where are you sprouting, and then they tried to eat theirs, but they got stuck in the mason jar.
Okay. So let's move to sprouting after this. I just want to kind of show you the size of the grit that we're looking at for layer birds. I think a lot of people use a little bit smaller grit, and it passes through the gizzard, so you're actually using a lot more of it. I really appreciate the scratch and peck grit. It's a pretty good size. Goes in the gizzard, does its job. Oh yeah, we forgot to mention our giveaway.
Right.
Yep. If you're watching this video and you share it, you're automatically entered to win this hat. Mm-hmm. Some of these clucking good grubs that our chickens go nuts for, and Russell goes nuts for.
Yeah, I'm sure Russell eats these.
Yep. Yeah. Those are Spanish black fly larvae, we really love these things. They're produced right here in North America. They're sourced really well. If you want to learn more about that, you can see them on Scratch and Peck's website. And you'll also win some of these clucking good herbs, which my chickens really go nuts for. So, you want to move on to the sprouting?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
What do we got of it?
These?
This one right here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so here is some organic whole barley, and this is what we're going to be using to sprout. We're actually not currently sprouting. We're just focusing on fermenting our feeds, but in the winter, sprouting is important because your chickens don't have access to as much fresh ground, and they can't free range and get as much grass. Sure. So you kind of sprout some grass for them. And what we're kind of excited about here is this interesting little sprouting kit that Scratch and Peck has put together. So, just like this, it's pretty simple. Mm-hmm. I don't know, do you want to do this one?
Sure.
Okay. So this is our fermenting.
So, all of it?
About a third of the mason jar. So once again, this is kind of the amount that I would use for, 2 to 3 birds.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
So we have that, and then you want to use this and cover it, say, about halfway up the jar.
Okay. There we are.
All right. So now we'll call this day 1, right?
Sure.
So let's hop in our handy dandy time machine here. I always give this a good shake just to make sure I have everything's gotten wet. And just put it on the shelf. Put it in a cool, dry area. I don't guess it really matters if it's dry.
So this is day 1.
Yep, day 1.
Okay. What is day 2 going to look like?
Day 2 is going to be 24 hours later, and you're going to open this up, and you're going to start smelling a little bit of it's almost like brewing beer. You start to smell that almost yeasty smell.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The sugars are starting to get activated. They're starting to work. And all you do at day 2, again, what I love about both of these things is it's all really easy, and it's not a ton of work.
Sure.
I put this little screen on there. Day 2.
Day 2.
Day 2. It just sits like this all day.
Okay, and that sit on a plate or something like that?
Yeah. Or, if you have some sort of clever setup where you can hang it or whatever, the principal thing you want to make sure you're doing is that these grains are not sitting in water, mm-hmm. and they're not encouraging mold growth. So they have a decent amount of air moving around them.
Okay.
So then what you do, well, I guess I can leave that screen on.
Sure.
At the end of day 2,
Okay.
pour some fresh water in there.
So would you say dump it before you go to work, and then before you go to bed, pour more water on? Is that kind of what you're
Yeah,
thinking? Okay.
yeah, if you want to do that. And again, all these things depend on what the temperature is. So you're going to have to experiment a little bit. Oops, making a mess. And then you just dump it again. I mean, and then at that point, you will have some grains that are growing about 2 to 3 inches.
Okay.
And,
Wow.
and then that is really your optimal height. That's where you get the most protein and nutrient availability. And as we were talking about a little bit before the show, you want to make sure that you don't get it into the fodder territory, 4 to 6 inches of growth, because that's where you might start having some mold issues.
Sure.
Cool. So that answers some of the questions that we're seeing in the comments about which grains we're using. Once again, if you want to come in here, we're using whole barley.
Yep. And they also have this nice.
Yep, and you
Good
could
corn.
you could use some corn as well and mix that in there, especially in the winter, because corn's a heat-producing grain for your
What
flock.
about this oyster shell that you have over there?
Oh yeah, we didn't really talk about that.
And then I
'Cause-
want to add, Scratch and Peck said that it's actually black soldier fly larvae, not Spanish fly larvae.
Did I say that again? I'm so sorry. I say that sometimes, and it's an important distinction because you do see a lot of Spanish fly larvae out there, and we're not necessarily against that, but we do want to say that that black soldier fly larva is better sourced, and I think it's here domestic, and I think it's a really, really nice, not just a treat, it's a really high protein additive that you can throw in there. Your chickens just go nuts for it. It really engages their natural behaviors, helps them with coat quality. So thanks, Scratch and Peck, for giving us the correction on that. We've made that slip up before, but it's a very important distinction, actually. Oyster shells are something that you're going to start putting in your feed around this time as well, especially with your layers. It's just it's a calcium supplement. And we want to reiterate that if you share this video, you are entered to win this hat, some of these Clucking Good grubs, black soldier fly, and some great herbs. Cool.
Something that I just wanted to talk about anecdotally is a conversation that I had with Pat Foreman at one of our last fairs. She was talking about eggs and how eggs are a complete food. So you can think of your diet in relation to your chicken's diet. If they're eating their oyster shell and they have longer intestines, so they're absorbing more nutrients, that's more nutrients for you in your eggs. So feed them good, eat good yourself.
Yeah, and I think I saw on something here, you are what you eat eats thing. And I mean, yeah, it's right here on the feed bag. You know, Scratch and Peck feeds, you are what your animals eat. That's totally what we're about here. I know that's what the good people at Scratch and Peck are about too. So are there any other questions? Maybe we just do, another rundown of what we did here today. Pretty quick, pretty easy, but that is what fermenting your feeds and sprouting your feeds are all about. Because, if you're like us, you get up in the morning, you don't have time to go through a huge rigmarole before you come to work.
I have a question.
You want to do this?
So we have harvested this. We have our sprouts. Do we just dump out and start over at that point? We just dump it into the pen and they...
You would want to have like three different jars going. And usually it will have kind of all grown together, so you'll just break it apart.
Okay.
And then they'll go nuts, as chickens do.
Yes.
Also, Dan wants to hear about the timing of fermentation again.
Okay, so Dan wants to know about the timing of fermentation. So, Dan, we've made a little bit of a mess here, so if you kind of bear with us.
I have one more question after that.
Okay. I'm not going to try this live on camera. The timing of fermentation. Step one, you put, a quarter pound of food per bird, dry food, in a container, and you cover it double. You do double the amount of food, water. Now, right away, you see that created a wet mash. This was what, 10 minutes ago?
Right.
I mean, this is 10 minutes ago that we put that wet mash in there. I mean, that water in there, and it's already created kind of a wet mash. That right there is all you need to increase the villa length that increases your protein availability. So if you don't want to ferment your feeds, just wet your mash. That's step one. Step two, let it sit out. Or you can add a little bit of apple cider vinegar to it if you really want to get it going. Or you can have a setup where the water that was on top of yesterday's fermented feed trickles down into the next day's so that it carries the mother with it. And I think Charlotte was saying, yeah, the SCOBY. So if you look here, you might see some bubbles. We've put some extra water in there just because we were messing with the sprouts. But this stuff is not an exact science. So after the video, I'll add a little bit more feed to this just to make it, a good level. And then you have fermented feeds in anywhere between 1 to 3 days, depending on the temperature outside. Here in Kansas, it's about 100 degrees outside right now. I'll put water on feed in the morning, and it's fermented by the afternoon.
Okay. So you leave it outside then?
Yep,
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
And yeah, you had an interesting tip for keeping the flies out of it that I'm gonna use.
That's right. And that was on Heather Nicholson's post on Community Chicken. She recommended putting some pantyhose over the bowl, and that'll keep the flies out of it, which, of course, a good screen.
Yeah, so if you have some pantyhose laying around, put it over it. And once again, want to remind people you only have a few more minutes to share this video to enter to win this. We're going to be choosing a random person to share it with. And just want to, one more time, these are black soldier fly larvae, and you can learn more about them on Scratch Impact's website. And I think that's a really cool story, so it's worth clicking over to.
The other question is kind of unrelated, but maybe it has something to do with it. But John was asking, what does it mean when hens lay shellless eggs? And I think there was a video posted the other day where there was an egg that didn't have
Yeah,
a
she was
shell.
rolling it
It's very,
around.
gooey.
I mean, I would suspect that has to do with the calcium deficiency, in which case, it's worth reiterating that as your chickens move, like ours have, from a grower feed, we started them on a starter feed, moved them to a grower feed, and now they're on a layer feed. That's where we start seeing more calcium, a little bit lower crude protein, and we start mixing in oyster shells with our feeds. And usually, just like the grit, we'll have that freely available. So I have a rooster, or what I think is a rooster, in with my flock. That rooster does not need the oyster shells. He's not going to eat them. He's just going to leave them be. But the hens, especially as they start laying more, they're going to eat more
They'll
oyster
just naturally
shells.
crave it and figure
Yeah.
out that that's something that they want by choosing around the yard.
Yeah, so just to kind of recap here, we were sprouting organic barley.
Yep.
We've got that going. We should start to see some sprouts in a couple days. And then we created a wet mash that is going to start fermenting. And we've got this mash right here that is fermenting, and you can kind of see the bubbles that are a clear sign of fermentation. And if you want to know when your feed is actually done, you just give it the smell test. If you have that sort of sour smell, that's the clear sign that you've moved from the yeast activation phase to the lactobacillus phase. That's what you want.
Okay, cool.
Cool. And if there's no more questions, we will be messaging a random share. Let's give them 10 more minutes. So if you have 10 minutes, in 10 minutes we're going to message someone to win these grubs, these herbs, and this very cool hat. I don't know, you want to model it for
Well,
us?
I've got the ponytail, but sure, why not?
Yep.
There you go.
You can
Your
win that hat. It's in my office, and it needs to go to you.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
So until next week, thanks for joining us, and thanks for supplying all the feed and supporting our flock, Scratch Impact. Learn more about them at scratchimpact.com.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thanks, everybody.